Curse of the Haunted Mirror, shared by EPATBP. Even though my grandmother never openly called herself a witch, there isn't really any other term that fits her better. She would tell folks that she was just spiritual and would say she did tarot card readings for the people in her village as a hobby. I can recall several times when I overheard her giving advice to other women that often involved spells or magic, and she'd correct anyone who called her a witch, asking them to simply call her Mary Eleanor instead of using such a negative term. Growing up with my mom and grandmother meant spending most of my life in their home in the village. There, I frequently witnessed her doing rituals for good luck or to keep away evil spirits. She'd always say it's better to be safe than sorry. My mom sometimes joins these activities too, but didn't delve as deeply into spiritual practices as my grandmother did. Both of them carried crystals with them. My mom wore hers on a ring, while my grandma had one hanging from a necklace she kept hidden under her shirts. I remember seeing my grandma spray the house every few weeks using the contents of a black bottle stored in a wooden box on our living room shelf. On Sunday mornings, she'd stand outside and burn sage while saying the Lord's Prayer. Despite being raised by two people involved in these practices, I've never really believed in things like evil spirits or setting out bowls of rice for good luck. Of course, I wouldn't argue when they did such things. Instead, I would sit quietly as they lined doorways and windows with black salt to prevent evil from entering our home, painted tree trunks white to ward off La Lechuser, and drank moon water my grandma prepared monthly. Even though I'm not the most spiritual person compared to my mom and grandmother, I still find myself doing things like standing a broom upside down, hanging a horseshoe above my front door, and carrying around St. Michael's sword talisman that my grandmother gave me when she thought someone was casting spells on me. It reminds me of her and makes me feel closer to her even though she's gone now. Plus, it wouldn't be honest if I said these things don't make me feel safer too. There's one thing that has always caught my interest: the tale of the witch in the mirror. In my grandmother's house, there was a tiny closet at the end of the hallway that nobody ever used. The door to this closet was painted black, making it stand out from all the other doors in the house. People told me not to go inside, which only made me more curious about what might be hidden in there. When I was around 10 years old, my cousin Rebecca and I were playing hide and seek with some of our other cousins. We decided to check out that mysterious closet for a hiding spot. To our surprise, the door wasn't locked, so we opened it up to find just one oval mirror hanging on the back wall. The closet itself was very small, barely large enough for both Rebecca and me to stand side by side without bumping into each other. When my grandmother found us in there, she grabbed us out of the closet quickly, shut the door behind us, and took us straight to the kitchen. There, she did something called a cleansing ritual on us. After that was done, she brought all our cousins together and told us about the mirror in the closet and why we shouldn't go near it again. According to my grandmother, when my mom was just a baby, a witch named Claudia, who had been possessed by an evil spirit, started targeting her. My grandmother wouldn't give many details, but she said that Claudia tried several times to kidnap and sacrifice my mother, as well as cast spells on the rest of our family. My grandmother explained that when my mom was around 5 years old, they managed to trap Claudia with some help from friends. Since then, Claudia's soul has been trapped inside the mirror for many years. To keep us safe, my grandmother warned us not to look into the mirror or try to contact Claudia because she feared we might accidentally release her and let a great evil loose in our village. My mom also supported this story, But when I asked my grandmother about the spell used to trap Claudia, she would get upset and wouldn't tell me more. Eventually, I understood that she wasn't going to share whatever it was with me, and there might have been a solid reason for keeping it a secret, so I let it go. To be honest, I had completely forgotten about the mirror and Claudia's story until a few weeks ago. When I was 15 years old, my mom and I moved to another state. We would visit my grandmother every other month or so. The last time we went back to see her, my mom visited on her own because I couldn't get time off work. About 2 days after she got there, a neighbor called me with the worst news. Both my mom and my grandmother had passed away in their sleep from heart attacks on the same night. What are the chances of that happening? I didn't have much time to grieve before someone told me I needed to clear out everything at my grandmother's house and donate whatever I didn't want to keep. I spent 2 days going through each room, boxing up her herbs and little trinkets she had scattered everywhere. Some cousins came over and took a few items to remember our grandma by. I decided to hold on to most of the stuff and loaded it all into my car. As I was making my final check through the house, I stopped in front of that black door at the end of the hallway. I thought about leaving the mirror behind, but figured my grandmother wouldn't want me to do that with something so important. So, I grabbed a bedsheet from the closet and covered it up before carrying it out to my car. I had this nagging feeling about the mirror, probably due to all those stories my grandma told me about it. In the end, I put it upside down in my car with the sheet still over it, secured by a hair tie. When I got home, I realized that now I was faced with another challenge. What should I do with this mirror? I had no clue how to handle something like a haunted mirror supposedly holding an evil spirit. After thinking about it way too much, I ended up putting the mirror in my storage closet, still covered by the bedsheet. At first, everything seemed okay. But then, about 3 days after bringing the mirror home, I started noticing that the closet doors would open all by themselves every few minutes. Every morning when I walked down the hall, they'd be standing wide open again, even though I had closed them just a little while before breakfast. I rummaged through the box of my grandma's stuff until I found what I was after, a jar full of black salt. I brought it to the closet and laid out a line of salt under each door. A few days later, when I got home from the grocery store about a week later, I saw that the salt had been scattered all over the hallway, and the closet door was wide open. I tried to recall all the rituals my grandma used for getting rid of evil spirits and did some of them, but none seemed to work. At this point, I felt really paranoid and anxious. One morning, I woke up to find that my bedsheet had been thrown into the hallway, and the mirror was propped up facing out towards it. This made me realize I didn't want anything like that inside my house. I did some research online about cleansing mirrors and tried a few times, then brought it back in and put it back in the closet for 2 weeks. When nothing happened, I finally took it out again and decided to place it in the guest bedroom. Throughout the day, I kept checking on it, waiting for something crazy to happen, but everything remained normal, making me think maybe I had gotten rid of any bad spirits. But you probably know where this is going. I was wrong. One night I woke up to a woman crying. Peering out my window and walking around the house, looking outside both windows, didn't turn up anyone. Confused, I followed the sound down the hall until it led me to the guest bedroom. As I reached for the door handle, I felt a sudden chill. When I opened the door slowly and turned on the light, I saw that the crying was coming from inside the mirror hanging opposite the entrance. There was a woman kneeling in front of it with her head bowed, her shoulders shaking as she sniffled. She wore a black lace dress, but her long brown hair covered most of her face and body. As I stepped closer, about 3 feet away, I called out to her. "Hello?" The woman looked up at me, and I gasped when I saw my own reflection staring back from within the mirror. When she saw me, she stopped crying, stood up, and sniffled while running her hand under her nose. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Are you Claudia?" I asked. She nodded, pushing her hair back before letting it fall over her shoulders again. She squinted and tilted her head, studying me closely. "You're Mary Eleanor's granddaughter," she whispered, looking at me in amazement. I nodded my head. "Was it you then?" "What was me?" I asked back. "Did you get rid of the evil spirit that had been controlling me for all these years?" She leaned forward, her hands pressing against the glass as if trying to reach through. I didn't know what to say because I wasn't sure what exactly I had done, and it certainly hadn't worked how I'd hoped. It felt really strange talking to someone trapped in a mirror. The room around Claudia was clearly visible, but it looked like we were looking at each other from two different rooms separated by glass. "Well?" she asked impatiently, waiting for an answer. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess that's me." "Oh, thank you." She sighed with relief. "How long have you been here?" 40 years, I replied. "And your grandmother?" "She's dead." "I'm so sorry. What about your mom?" "She died too." She nodded thoughtfully. "I know we don't know each other, but could you maybe let me out of this place?" "What?" "No way. You tried to kill my mother more than once. How do I know you won't try and hurt me now?" "That wasn't me. It was the spirit controlling me at that time." "But you got rid of it," she explained, her voice breaking as if about to cry again. "I'm sorry, but how can I trust that?" Claudia took a deep breath before nodding solemnly. "You're right. You have no reason to believe me. Plus, from what I see, you don't look like someone with magical knowledge. So even if you wanted to let me out, you probably couldn't." She sounded sincere, but I didn't trust her at all. She seemed untrustworthy, and she was also correct that I wouldn't be able to free her anyway. "Why do I look like you?" I asked instead. She just shrugged in response. I stared at her for a bit longer until the eerie similarity between us made me feel uncomfortable. For about 4 days, Claudia remained trapped in the mirror, but things soon got worse. Random items kept going missing around my house before turning up again in odd places. Lights would flicker on and off late at night, and I'd hear footsteps and giggling from empty rooms. Even Claudia looked scared now. "You're frightened," she said one day as I entered the guest room to close a window that had somehow opened by itself. I didn't say anything back. "It's not me if you're thinking that. The spell your grandmother put on me prevents me from doing any magic." I looked at her and sighed deeply. "Okay, then what is it?" She was silent for a moment as I observed her closely. "Have you brought in any of your grandmother's things here?" she asked eventually. "Yeah, lots of stuff like herbs, bottles, clothes, books, things like that," I replied hesitantly. "Things she used for spells." Claudia pressed on. "I mean, probably. Well, then it's likely something that came back with you. A spirit must have hitched a ride." I thought about what she said, and although it made sense, I wasn't ready to fully trust her yet. "Okay, how do we get rid of this thing then?" I asked firmly. "You need candles and wait for nighttime," she instructed as she surveyed the room. Following her advice, after dark fell, I gathered some candles and headed into the guest room. I placed them around the mirror a few feet away so Claudia could guide me through what to do next. "Okay, you'll need to light these," she said once I finished arranging the last candle. I grabbed the lighter and pulled out a jar of black salt as well. "What's that for?" Clordier asked. I opened up a jar, took down the mirror from where it hung on the wall, and leaned it against the floor instead. Then I sprinkled salt in a circle around the base of the mirror. "In case you're lying and try to escape somehow," I said as I put the jar back down. "I doubt you could ever actually set me free. You don't even know how to get rid of a spirit," she scoffed. I ignored her and started lighting all the candles. "You need to turn off the lights," Clordier instructed. I walked over, flicked off the light switch, and went back to stand in front of the mirror surrounded by lit candles. "Okay," Clordier whispered. "Once the candle wax starts melting a bit, you're going to drip some of it onto the mirror." "Why on the mirror?" "Because it's already magical. Use its energy to cast out the spirit." I did as she asked. "What next?" "You need to sit down with your back to me and close your eyes. You might feel something touching or breathing near you, but don't open your eyes." I sat down facing away from her, my hands sweating so badly that I kept wiping them on my pants. I focused on my breathing, trying not to get too paranoid. After a few seconds, there was a strong cold wind blowing through the room. The next thing I heard was the sound of breaking glass and all the candles went out. "Clordier?" I asked, opening my eyes to find the mirror shattered and the bedroom window wide open. The salt had been scattered across the floor as well. I got up, turned on the lights again, and picked up the mirror's pieces. They broke into 6 big chunks, but when I looked back in the mirror, all I saw was myself. Clordier was gone. "Fuck." I shouted angrily and frustrated. "Johanna," a voice called out from outside. I walked over to my window and saw Clordier standing on my front lawn. She waved at me with that odd smile playing across her lips. Her face began to change right before my eyes, shifting from mine to a dark gray skin covered in wrinkles. Her eyes were deep, set black holes the size of golf balls, no split down the middle like it had been shattered, and dry cracked lips the same color as her skin. Then she looked up, and I followed her gaze to see a flock of crows descending towards her, circling, before vanishing into thin air with her. Seconds later, all windows on our street exploded, showering glass across front lawns. The streetlights flickered and then popped, going out completely as well. All around me was absolute darkness. Not even the moon or stars could be seen anymore. I spent the rest of that night trying to find something in my grandmother's books and journals, but couldn't find anything helpful for this situation. It's been 3 days since then, and it seems like everything is getting darker by the minute. I didn't think that was possible. My neighbors have tried leaving their cars too. We watched as they drove into the surrounding darkness, but never saw them come back out. The only indication they left at all are screams cutting through the night a few seconds after they drive away. I don't know if anyone will ever see this, but I'm running out of options here. It's getting so dark now that even my neighbors' houses are barely visible. And I hope no one finds out it's somehow connected to me. What would happen then? Forbidden Love, shared by Mountain Crown. Her name was Alice, and no, calling her witch isn't disrespectful. She really was one, like an enchantress or sorceress, basically someone who does magic spells and stuff. I imagined her dancing around in the moonlight without any clothes on, but that's just my wild imagination. If I had known ahead of time that she was a witch, I might have been more careful about getting involved with her. People often say things like, "My mom warned me about girls like you," and sure enough, my own mother did warn me. So did all those fairy tales. None of them ever said to date witches. But Alice was cute. We met through a dating app and quickly agreed to meet up in person. Sitting there drinking coffee together, I wasn't thinking clearly at all. I wish I could say she had some kind of spell on me, but if anything, it was her big brown eyes and the way she smiled while we drank from our shared cream macchiato. Did I fall for her? I don't know. But I liked her a lot, and when she casually mentioned being a witch during one of our conversations about hobbies and work stuff, it didn't change how I felt. By then, I was committed to seeing her again. What difference did it make anyway? I'm not the type who judges people based on weird labels. Witches are just another kind of person in our area. No one's ever heard of them anywhere else as far as we know. So while it might sound strange to you, around here it feels almost normal. At first, everything was great. She was super sweet and told me she had been lonely for a long time because people tended to avoid her. Sure, folks were polite enough, but there was always this invisible wall between them and her that stopped real connections from forming. People just got scared of her, I guess. I felt proud of myself for being different. Being nice to Alice gave me a bit of confidence. And yes, part of it might have been because she had those curvy hips, but mostly I was trying to do something good by reaching out to someone who needed friends. So we started dating, and soon enough, we were pretty serious about each other. It was her pushing things forward more than me, but that was fine since she did it in a really pleasant way. We even went on vacation together, renting a cabin near a lake east of town. She thought this would show how much he cared for me. Maybe not the most romantic gesture, right? But here's the thing, witches can only exist within certain boundaries around our area. Going far away is super hard on them, and if they travel too far, it could be deadly. So by staying at that cabin near the edge of her safe zone, she was already pushing her limits. By day 3, she had a fever, and by day 4, she wasn't leaving the bed anymore. She wanted me to stay for the full week so I could enjoy fishing with my new rod, but seeing how pale and weak she looked, I took us home that night, terrified about what might happen if we stayed longer. She perked right up as soon as we turned west, and by the time I pulled into her driveway, she seemed to have snapped out of it completely. That night, I ended up crashing at her place, and when we got ready for bed, I noticed that normal wasn't quite right. She was better, way more energetic than usual. I started hanging around her place a lot after that. While I still had my own apartment to keep things convenient, she would occasionally drop hints about living together. It made sense from an economic standpoint, but the freedom of having separate spaces felt important when we were young and could afford it later in life. It was on a Saturday morning that something weird happened. I usually stayed over on weekends, and this time I woke up early while she was still sleeping soundly. The night before had been a bit tense. Alice had been unusually quiet, sitting silently beside me on the couch. Later, when I tried to get close to her in bed, she turned away, saying she had a headache. Thinking it might be the time of month, I got dressed and quietly slipped out of the bedroom. As I was tiptoeing down the stairs, I stopped in my tracks. There wasn't a door where the doorway should have been. I blinked several times but couldn't believe what I saw. The spot where her front door used to be was just plain wall. "Hey, Alice." I called out, worried. She replied sleepily from down the hall. "Alice, where's the door?" "The door? Oh, that." she said as she came out of her bedroom in a flannel robe. I took it away. She walked into the kitchen while I stood there in disbelief. After a minute, I followed like an idiot. "Babe, why'd you take the door?" I asked. "I thought you might want to stay," she replied casually as she poured orange juice. "I need to leave," I said firmly. Alice sighed, clearly annoyed, and started making breakfast without looking at me. She was only preparing one plate and not saying a word. It seemed like she wanted this whole thing to be about her and nobody else. "Hey, Alice, we need to talk," I said, reaching out to touch her arm. "Don't you dare," she snapped suddenly. My hand recoiled as if it had been burned. It stung and felt tingly after that. What the heck? She wasn't supposed to use magic on me like this. There were rules about stuff like that, right? Alice seemed totally calm now, setting a single place at the table for herself. "Why don't you sit down?" she asked politely but coldly. "I'm not hungry," I muttered, still rubbing my sore hand. "That's fine," she said, buttering a slice of toast. "It isn't for you." I had no idea what else to do and started feeling scared. So I sat there while she finished her breakfast in silence. Once she was done eating, Alice looked up at me with a small but tight smile on her face. "Well," she said calmly, "what are your plans for today?" "Nothing." "I'm going home." "Listen, Alice, this isn't right." "You can't keep me here." "I see you're leaving then," she replied coolly. I turned to look back at the spot where the door should have been and saw it was still gone. "Alice." So she started, not paying attention to me. "You were heading home. Straight home, right? Or did you have plans to stop by Becky Greenfield's place on your way?" She asked this casually, like it was no big deal, like she was asking if I thought it would rain. But her eyes were as hard and cold as stones, making my stomach churn. I don't. I started, but my throat felt dry. "What do you mean by that?" Her face got even more serious as she walked away from the table. "What do I mean?" she asked. "Think about it while you clean up these dishes." I tried to go after her, saying, "Look, I can explain." But when I moved towards the door, my nose hit what felt like a solid wall. I stumbled back and almost fell. Through the doorway, I saw Alice sitting on the couch, glancing at me with those hard eyes. She mouthed the word "clean" before turning on the TV. The picture was moving, but there was no sound. At first, I thought she had just muted it, but then I realized that anything inside my head couldn't escape the barrier around me either. That stopped me from calling her names out loud. So, with no other choice, I started washing dishes. It wasn't easy being stuck in here, but maybe this gave me time to think and figure things out. Okay, you're probably wondering why Alice is so upset. Well, let's just say I haven't been completely faithful. There were a couple of slip-ups along the way, like one night with Becky Greenfield. But hear me out, it was nothing serious. It was all over after the third time, and I never planned on seeing her again. That's true, but maybe Alice doesn't need to know about every little thing. She already seemed to know a lot, and I had no idea how much. We talked before about magic, how there's no such thing as enchanted mirrors or crystal balls. Magic is all in our minds, she said. It's just what we believe. I remember being disappointed when she explained it that way. So you're saying magic isn't real? People just think it is. Exactly, she said, then snapped her fingers, and suddenly I felt feathers tickling me everywhere. As I collapsed laughing, She smiled and added, "But if it feels real to you, does it really matter?" She let the spell linger for a moment before ending it with another snap of her fingers. At first, I was angry because I thought she was just playing tricks on me, but then she pulled me into bed and whispered, "Don't be mad. Baby, let me show you how real this can feel." I had no doubts after that. Magic isn't about spells or objects, it's in our minds. As long as I think the door is blocked, my body won't let me open it. And if I believe there's nothing on the other side of the barrier, even touching the doorknob wouldn't help. Are you getting ready to call me a prize-winning idiot? Are you going to point out that if everything I just said was true, then yeah, she would have known all about my little side trip? That, hey buddy, get real because it's obvious she could read your mind. Wrong. She can't do that. Everyone knows witches can't read minds. Imagine what would happen in a small town if people thought their thoughts were being spied on. There'd be pitchforks and torches out on Main Street faster than you could say Salem witch trials. It wouldn't just look bad, it would be an all-out riot. So no, mind reading isn't possible. But somehow she knew something, and here I was stuck in the middle of it. I didn't take long to finish washing up, but maybe I could put together a quick defense while drying off the last utensil. As I finished putting things away, I felt some pressure lessen behind me. The TV noise suddenly became clear again. Here goes nothing. I slowly walked into the living room, trying my best disarming smile. Ellis. I started looking at her. Look, you know how much I love you, right? It's just us, remember. I sat down next to her and tried to put an arm around her. She shrugged me off. Come on, I pleaded. Becky. No way. We've only talked a few times at Flanagan's. She got a little tipsy one night and kissed me, but I pushed her away. That's it. Look at me. She turned towards me then, her eyes wet with tears. And yeah, I felt guilty too. But I thought, Jackie, my boy, now you've got her. You swear? She asked. There wasn't anything else? Yeah, I said quickly. Of course not. You're my itchy-witchy girl. What do I need with anyone else? She reached out to touch my face. I was ready for the sweet forgiveness that was coming. You stupid fucker, she shouted affectionately but angrily. You're still lying to me. A sound like a gong echoed in my mind as pain exploded behind my eyes, like someone had hit me with a frying pan. I slid off the couch and crawled backwards on the floor away from her. She was losing it. For the first time, I started to think she might actually hurt me. Stop it. I yelled back at her. You're crazy. You don't even know what you're doing. I saw you, she screamed back, standing up and looking furious. Dark shadows were swirling around her as if she was absorbing all the light in the room. She got into your truck. So what? I shouted. Can't I give someone a ride? She came to my house. She spat out each word like bullets. I threatened to turn her into a frog if she didn't tell me, but as if I could actually do that. There's nothing worse than leaving her the way she is, and yet you still... She paused for a second and then said in disgust, You fucked an old woman. Becky was only 35, I thought to myself. But Alice was working herself into something dangerous. The shadows were now covering her skin as they pulsed with every word she spoke. She came towards me, pushing me back until I hit the wall where there used to be a door. I should kill you, she raged, face twisted in fury. I should burn you. I should make you eat your... She might actually do it. In desperation, still on the floor, I blindly reached out behind me with one hand and grabbed something. With all my strength, I threw whatever was in my grasp at her like a tomahawk. The green ankle boot struck her on the forehead with a little thud. "Oh," she said. She sat down on the couch, the shadows dissipating around her. The room returned to normal as well. We looked at each other silently for a moment. Then she started crying uncontrollably. "I loved you," she sobbed. "I loved you so much." I tried saying something back, but she interrupted me. "Just go," she cried out. "Leave now." Behind me, the wall was once again where there used to be a door. It was a sorry scene, all right, but I knew better than to stick around and wait for her to change her mind. Slipping on my jacket, I made it halfway out before she called after me. "Jack," I turned around, and though I couldn't make out the words, they hit me like ice water through my skin, settling somewhere deep in my brain. I ran. That day, I left town and set up a hotel room in the next town over. The best part was knowing she couldn't follow me there. Everything worked out after that. Since I already commuted to work anyway, moving closer actually made it easier for me. Someone picked up my things from my apartment and brought them here. So yeah, that's how I ended up here now. Yes, the lesson is don't date witches. Wait a second. You think maybe there's another lesson? Like not cheating on your girlfriend. Yeah, I know. Trust me, I know all too well why I'm telling you this story. It's because of those last few words she said to me that day. They were like a spell cast in my mind, and now every time I think about dating someone new, I have to tell them the whole story first. Can't help it. So now that you know all this, what do you say? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. See you in the next one.